sacred space where you will be guided to meet your innermost self for the first time. She will awaken, evolve, and rise to new depths of unpaved territory, accepting herself wholly. I am your host, Madison Schrader. I'm delighted to welcome back Dijana from Aspect Astrology today, here to share her wisdom on how tailoring our personal routines to align with the moon's phases can help us access the care we need when we need it the most.
Yeah, it's great to be back with you, Madison. I really am enjoying your podcast, and thanks so much for having me back.
I want you to really think about how you feel when you look up at the moon. I know for me, even going back to when I was a child, looking up at the moon gives me a moment of peace where it's like the world just falls away and it's just me and the moon in that moment. It gives me clarity. It gives me peace. It gives me quiet. I've always been so captivated by the beauty of the moon, but also its underlying magic and the power and the feminine energy. I have always been fascinated and intrigued by her ever-changing forms and that beautiful glow. So if we dive a little deeper, how can we utilize the moon to our advantage and really connect with her? I guess the most common comment that is used when discussing the moon is when there's a full moon, everyone goes a little bit crazy. But the moon's power goes so far beyond just affecting our moods and our personal cycles. And the changing phases can actually help you set goals, create more abundance, and connect more deeply with your own inner wisdom. As she waxes and wanes, transforming through her different phases, we can see this transformation visually from Earth. But what a lot of people don't realize is as that transition is happening, she's also releasing different energies affecting how we feel at each time. If we align ourselves with that energy rather than resisting it, we can create more flow in our lives. Dijana, can you please explain what it means to work with the phases of the moon?
Okay, so people have worked with the energies and the different phases of the moon throughout all cultures and throughout all of human history. In fact, I think following the phases of the lunation cycle was a major aspect of astrology before the sun began to get a lot more focus. And in some ways, I believe this is related to the emphasis on the patriarchal energies and focusing more on male energy over the last 150 years than feminine energy. But now there seems to be a far greater awareness of working with the moon and its various phases. And I've really noticed an increase in popularity, particularly in astrology and working with the moon, its astrological cycles and its different lunation phases. So every 29 and a half days, the moon completes a full cycle, and each cycle represents a different point in her orbit. And it also represents a really beautiful cosmic timer that we can use and learn how to work with in order to bring focus or clarity or some sort of conscious magic into our lives. And the various phases, they affect our menstrual cycles, our moods, our rhythms, our energy levels, and our emotions for sure. I like to think about how the moon affects us personally by thinking about how much she influences our planet. Both our flora and our fauna and our oceans are very much dictated by lunar phases. The moon controls the tides of our oceans. She literally moves water. And when you think about it, we're made up of 60% water, so her effect on us can really be profound. And I first started investigating the moon when I noticed that I could barely sleep during a full moon phase. And that really sparked my interest in understanding moon phases. I still don't necessarily sleep particularly well in full moon phases, but at least now I can prepare for it. So you can use the moon as a manifestation tool. And when you really start to tune into the phases and the signs that the moon is in, you can really start bringing some magic into your life. So I guess to start with, knowing your own moon sign makes this even more potent, because knowing the sign and sometimes and even the phase of the moon when you were born not only offers you a lot of information about yourself, but once you really start tracking the moon, you really get to understand your own internal lunar calendar. And in astrology, the moon represents our subconscious drivers, our instinctual needs, our emotions, our moods, and it can tell us a lot about what we need to genuinely feel happy and fulfilled in our lives. I like to say we do our sun, but we feel our moon. She also represents, and really fundamentally, the archetypal feminine energy, the divine feminine. Women in general, our wombs, our breasts, our sense of home, our need for safety. And she spends about 2 to 2.5 days in each astrological sign. And you can begin to notice when your moods might be up or down depending on the phase and the stage of the moon and the sign that they're in. So, for example, I have a Leo moon, which is a fire sign, and I know that when the moon is traveling through another fire sign, such as Leo or Aries or Sagittarius, it's actually making a positive aspect to my moon, and that usually my feelings and my energy will be slightly more buoyant at those times. So I just know when the moon is in another fire sign, that's I'm going to feel a little bit more energetic, a little bit more buoyant, want to possibly socialize a bit more than usual. And contrarily, when she's in a water sign, I'm usually feeling more internal, more introverted, more with like I'm wanting to go within. To really work with the moon as a manifesting and a wish maker, there are particular phases that we can work with. And each lunar phase can represent a different energetic principle from beginnings to endings. So, for example, the new moon or dark moon phases is very different to full moon energy. And as it passes through various astrological signs, each phase takes on a unique flavour.
What does each phase bring attention to?
There are actually 8 significant phases of the moon. And I'm not going to go into all of those because we would be here for quite some time. But we start with the new moon, which is also known as the dark moon. And of course, this is when the moon is literally not visible to us at all. But we have other phases. After the new moon, we move into the waxing crescent moon, then the first quarter moon, the gibbous moon, then to the full moon, followed by the disseminating moon, the third quarter moon phase, the balsamic moon, and back to the new moon. Now, if you are interested, you can investigate all those different moon phases, and they all do have particular energetic principles, but primarily and for this purpose, I'm working with the new and the full moons mostly. It's also really cool to actually discover what phase of the moon you were born under. Were you actually born during a full moon or a new moon? Knowing that, or a quarter moon or a waxing or a waning moon, there's a lot of information online that you can actually get about what moon phase you were born in and how that might actually affect your personality and how you can work with the moon yourself. But it's quite a lengthy and separate topic, so I'm not necessarily going to focus on that. So we're just going to look at the new and the full moon phase. Is that okay?
Absolutely, that sounds perfect. But before we do go on, I thought it might be interesting to know what moon cycle I was born under. So I was born in a waxing gibbous moon phase, which is the phase just before the full moon. And I did a little bit of research. I just went on to moongiant.com and read a little bit about what that means for my personality. So I'm going to read what it says. It says, individuals born under this moon are predisposed to be caring, nurturing, and calming. Well, I do believe that I'm caring and nurturing. I don't think I've got the calming down pat yet, but this must mean that it is possible for me. You likely excel at developing relationships with other people, guiding them and inspiring them to reach new heights in their lives. If you put in the time and effort, you can easily surround yourself with people who love you or at least respect you. On the flip side, this also means that you are acutely aware of your own potential, specifically your own potential to achieve perfection. Tragically, even though you can be an amazing mentor and guide to others, that same impulse transforms into perfectionism when it comes to yourself. This compulsion can be debilitating if you don't keep it in check. To fully achieve your potential, you need to accept that you will never actually be perfect, that there will always be room for more growth, and that's what makes life beautiful. So now that I know those things about myself, I can use that. Now I would love to learn more about the new moon and the full moon.
So with the new moon, as I said, also known as the dark moon, it means that the sun and the moon are in the same astrological sign. And she, being the moon, comes between the sun and the earth, so we cannot see her at all. So the moon is literally not getting any light from the sun. And this is the beginning of what we call a lunation or a lunar cycle. The new moon brings our focus and our energy to new beginnings. It can be a time to reset, when we can work with the energetic principles of the sign that it's in to put focus on where we might want to set intention around a particular area. So, for example, if we're experiencing a new moon in Taurus, which will be our next upcoming new moon, our next full moon will be the Libran full moon happening on the 16th, but the next new moon will be the Taurian new moon. So just to take that as an example, if we are working with a Taurian new moon, it might be a really good time to set new intentions around how we manage our material and our monetary values. So Taurus, amongst other things, rules our material resources, and of course that includes money. So just as a really brief example, we could use that time to start intentions around a new savings regime, for example. But it's really all about setting new intentions and what we'd like to bring focus on in our lives. So I kind of consider the new moon to be the phase of making wishes and manifesting and really visualizing what you'd like to bring to fruition. So it's very much about setting the intention for the month ahead, where things can culminate and grow as we move into the full moon stage. So with the full moon, and obviously this is the moon phase that most people will recognize, and I think almost everyone on the planet at some time or other has looked up in awe and amazement at the beauty of the full moon. This is when she's moved from darkness and now she's in full light, and it's 2 weeks later, the full moon stage. And this is the stage energetically where some of the intentions that we have set during the new moon phase can culminate. And this phase is especially very much about what we may now want to review in light of our intentions that we've set on the new moon phase, what we recognize that we might need to release or let go of, and especially those sorts of energetic things that are holding us back from achieving the goals that we've set around the new moon phase. So the full moon is always going to be in the opposite sign of what the previous new moon was in, and will also be opposite to the sign that the sun is in. So if you know that, for example, we're currently in Aries phase, and if you know enough about astrology to know what the opposite sign of Aries is, it's Libra, you know that the full moon is going to be in Libra. So the sun and the moon are in opposition and in an opposite sign. And this is kind of really important to remember, because the astrological signs in opposition are always there to teach us something about ourselves. So when the full moon actually falls in your moon sign, it's particularly potent, and there's often some real lessons that we can learn about exploring the energetic principles of our opposite sign. So, like we were saying before, with the new moon in Taurus, the next full moon after the Libran one will be in the sign of Scorpio. And amongst many other things, if Taurus is about money on a very mundane level, Scorpio is actually about shared resources. And so we can use how we work with our material values and possessions in relationship with another person. And a lot of people might not realize that Scorpio is very much about that, sharing our resources. So the full moon can then be asking us to focus on what habits or mindsets that we might have around money, how we share it, how we use it, how we integrate it into our lives, and what we've been conditioned to believe around money, and what we might want to actually let go of in regards to any habits or attitudes around manifesting money in abundance to us. And that's just a really brief, very brief example of how that can be used. We often feel things really deeply during a full moon, and depending on your own astrological chart, as everything becomes illuminated, full and buoyant during a full moon, you can also experience some really profound shifts, some real magic and intensity, but both personally and also in our interpersonal relationships. So I highly recommend it's worthwhile knowing your partner's moon sign too, just to be able to watch how you're both energetically reacting to the different moon phases and the different signs that they're in. But at least it's really wise to find out what your moon sign is. And if you're keen to track the moon and discover how you can work with it, I suggest you just start working with the new and the full moons at least. And you can find out your moon sign via heaps of websites and apps that are out there. You don't have to know your exact time of birth, but you do need to know within a couple of hours, because you don't want to be... The moon changes signs every 2.5 days. So if you're in one of those 2.5 days where it was very much in that sign, you're pretty safe. But if you're born just before or just after it changes, it's really kind of good to know your time. There's also a myriad of apps and websites and Instagram people to help you learn how to work with the moon. I always post during a new and a full moon, and in the full moon in particular, I offer free workbooks that help people work with the moon's energy. And I do this because I really feel, for me personally, the full moon, I think it's got something to do with the physicality of her and how beautiful she is, that I find I naturally work more with the full moon than the new moon. And because the full moon's about a time of release, I use these workbooks to help us dive deep and ask ourselves some really self-reflection questions. I offer affirmations and exercises and rituals that you can do each month. And then I also do a real focus on the sign that the moon is in. So they go into a lot of detail. Yeah, there's lots of information for self-reflection.
What are some rituals that can be performed to help us at each phase of the lunar cycle?
So I spend a lot of time thinking about rituals and affirmations and questions for reflection, especially at the new and the full moon phases. And in particular, as I said before, I think it's really important to know what your moon sign is and what sign each month new and full moon will fall into, because this really gives us a lot of insights to the energetic principles that we can work with during each phase. And as I mentioned before, finding a good full moon workbook can be a really profound and wonderful start. And for the new moon phase, I really think writing your intentions of what you would like to begin, what you'd like to manifest or bring into fruition for yourself is one of the best rituals you can do. And harnessing this around the sign that the new moon is in gives you a real focus. So writing your intentions, especially around the themes that the sign is in, will really harness and help you, really does help you bring some magic into your life. And once you start doing it, you'll actually notice that you become more and more aware of your intentions that you are setting. You're far more conscious, and you're really working with the energetic principles of natural cycles, and you'll start to notice some real magic can happen. So when you're setting the intentions, you're in a way, it's really like just making a wish that may come to fruition during the preceding full moon stage. I often suggest writing and then burying your intention in the ground underneath a plant that you would like to grow, because as it grows and as you water it, you're like intentionally sending it energy, watching it grow and reinforcing the energy behind the intention. So this is actually one of my favorite new moon rituals. Very much I like to do that at night time. So if I'll write down an intention, it might be the tiniest little plant, just even a herb in my herb garden, and I bury the intention in there and I know what it is. Often, actually, my daughter writes the intention, and it has, those sticks that you use to name your herbs. She writes her intention on it, so she watches the plants grow and she knows which intention she's watering and paying conscious attention to. It's really great. And the bonus is you get some new plants at the same time. So this is something that I really do, particularly in a new moon phase when it's in an earth sign.
What a fantastic idea. I love that so much. And I might actually try it myself if that's okay. I'm a visual person. So to actually visualize and be able to physically see this plant growing, it will really help me feel like my intention is growing as well. So I think this is a really, really clever idea.
You can also literally stand outside and speak directly to you can't see the moon when it's in new moon stage, but look, if you don't think your neighbours are going to think you're completely crazy, you can literally stand out there and speak your intentions out loudly to the sky.
I do this. I actually don't just do this for the new moon though. I speak to the moon a lot, actually. I guess it's a form of prayer for me. So whether it's been a good day and I want to speak about something that I'm grateful for, or if it's been a really challenging day and I'm seeking help or guidance, or just feeling quite alone and just need that comfort, I will look up at the sky and I will talk to the moon. It gives me, like I said before, it gives me peace. And similar to how I journal and I'm writing those thoughts so I can get them out of my head, speaking them to the moon is like a weight off my shoulders.
Using music really helps, and finding a song that aligns with your intentions and just during that day singing that song is another real powerful way to sort of embody those intentions, what you might like to start. So it's so easy today to just put in a keyword in Spotify or whatever, and you'll get a million songs that might help you literally tune in musically and energetically. So that's really another great one I use.
Oh, wow. This is another great idea. I love all your suggestions. Thank you so much for bringing them here today. I think music can often communicate when we can't find the words to do so ourselves. So I think this is a really, really good one as well.
Affirmations are also really powerful. So as an example, let's say we're working with the new moon in Taurus and we're looking for a change and a reset around how we work with money, how our relationships with money works. So we can find all sorts of positive affirmations on the internet, but probably the best person ever for this is Louise Hay. So if you don't know Louise Hay, look her up. Look up Louise Hay intentions online and you'll come up with a million beautiful affirmations, I should say. And so you can quote affirmations consciously during the new moon phase, such as, I attract money into my life. I'm abundant and capable of saving wisely for whatever it is that you want to be saving for. And you can write, again, all these sorts of affirmations, sometimes using these affirmations and literally writing them out and sticking them on your mirror for the next 2 or 3 weeks or for the month helps you really focus. And just saying them to yourself really does help you focus on that intention and help it, I find, come into fruition a lot more easily. So for the full moon, this is really a period of release, of letting go of whatever in our life is holding us back. So perhaps letting go of an attachment or a hurt around a past relationship, letting go of a fear, a habit you'd like to rid yourself of. The list is endless, really. And again, like the new moon, I feel one of the most powerful rituals is to write and then release. But depending on the element that the moon sign is in, and what I mean by that is fire, earth, air, or water, there are different ways. So when it's actually in fire, you write down what it is that you want to release or let go of and then burn it. I use that also for air, when the moon's in an air sign, because the smoke is literally carrying it up into the air. During water, I often literally soak it in water and watch the writing just dissipate off the water and float away. And obviously, when it's in earth, I bury it, but I don't plant. I'm burying it deep because I want it gone, right, and out of the way.
I have always wanted to work with the moon phases, and I've tried to a little bit here and there, but always found it quite overwhelming. So I guess I kept sort of taking a step forward and then maybe taking a step back again. I'm really, really thankful that you're putting forward these suggestions, and especially about using and working with the elements. I love this concept so much, and I definitely am going to integrate this into my monthly practices.
There's lots of stuff we can do during a full moon. One of the things I like to do very intentionally is usually to have a really beautiful ritualistic bath. So getting out your crystals and putting in your beautiful essential oils, put some music on, lock the door.
This is my favorite ritual for a full moon, and one that I started a long, long time ago, and I look forward to each month. I definitely use crystals and essential oils and music, and I just meditate.
Being able to just genuinely get into the embodiment of water, which the moon rules, and meditate in water is such a beautiful way to use that full moon energy. I also visually use the water from the bath as that representation of release, by when you let the plug go and that water goes. That's also just another visualization of releasing. You can bathe your crystals under a full moon, and you can also create moon water. So putting your crystals to charge out during a full moon just really energizes them and it's almost like a reset for your crystals. Again, there's lots of information on the internet about which crystals to use for what times, so I just recommend checking that out. But the other thing is to use moon water, or to create moon water. So moon water, what is that? That is literally taking a bowl, and I like to use a really nice bowl of just tap water and putting it outside to soak up that lunar energy during the full moon. And then afterwards, you can intentionally use that moon water to cleanse a sacred space or a ritual that you might have to cleanse your crystals. You might use it to clean any part of your life that you want to, again, rid some energetic principles from. You can add herbs to it. You can add it to your bath, into a ritualistic bath. The key thing is, though, don't do it during an eclipse phase, because that really, the moon cycles are particularly strong during an eclipse phase, and the eclipse will either be in a new or a full moon phase. Again, if you're following good astrologers or following some good apps, you will always know when an eclipse phase is, but just don't use moon water or put your crystals out during an eclipse phase. Again, during a full moon, you can use affirmations of release. So whatever it is you might want to release, I'm releasing my need to control a particular situation, or I'm releasing a hurt from whatever. Again, speaking to the moon. I will often just sit outside. I've got these really good camping chairs that recline, and I literally sit outside as much as I possibly can, even in the middle of winter, often with my daughter, and we'll just have let's just have a moon bath. And we'll just even having a conversation around the principles that are to do with the sign that the moon's in is lovely. Working with women during a full moon is a beautiful cyclical thing to do, and as is understanding the different goddesses associated. So each moon phase has different goddesses associated with them, and you can actually, again, investigate this online and start to literally work with those goddesses, whether they be Greek Roman goddesses, they can be Hindu goddesses, whatever works for you. I feel it's a really lovely way to connect with the divine feminine and bring feminine energy in.
I think a key point to really take away from this as well is when you're working with full moons and new moons, to take note of the particular signs that they're in. Each phase of the moon falls into either yin or yang, and this is at the very core of understanding when to push or when to pull back in life. What would you say the easiest way to start tracking the moon cycle is?
The easiest way to start tracking the moon cycle is just to look up. It's just to have the intention of doing it more than anything else. And I think, of course, there's so many different apps out there. You just have to Google moon phase apps or whatever, and you can find out really, really easily. Getting yourself a really good diary or an app where you can actually record your emotions around the moon phase, I think, is a really good way to start tracking the moon cycle.
This is what I did. I started noting down how I was feeling and physical symptoms that I would have at any point during the month. And then I could go back and see, okay, I seem to have that same symptom every time there's a new moon or every time there's a full moon. And then I started to learn more about myself and the way the moon was impacting how I was feeling. So for those who don't know, a lunar balance is a guided daily practice that closely follows the phases of the moon while also embracing natural magic, so herbs, crystals, seasons, to promote balance, de-stress, and manifest your intentions. It seemed quite daunting to me when I first wanted to make that conscious shift to align with the moon phases. So I was wondering if you have any advice on how to simplify and really enjoy this process.
Yeah, don't put too much, don't worry about it too much. Don't worry about whether you're doing it right or wrongly. The simplest way to use the process is literally just looking up and realizing it might be a full moon and deciding to do something that day. That's the simplest way. You don't have to become obsessive about it. If I miss a phase, I don't worry about it. But I think even just knowing which days the new moon and the full moon fall on, and just even thinking or meditating for 5 minutes that day around a small intention that you might want to set or something that you might want to release is probably the simplest way.
Now, by nature, women are lunar. So it's not actually a coincidence that the length of our menstrual cycles are synced up with the waxing and waning of the moon. What are the benefits to syncing your cycle up with that of the moons?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question because I've been actually really interested in this for a long time. So I'm hoping most people are aware that menstrual cycle, menstra, comes from the word which means moon. And it's actually the word for the moon connecting women very much to this lunation cycle, right? So, given the moon is the ruler of all feminine principles, like her, we wax and we wane in our menstrual cycles. Our energy levels and our emotions and our natural rhythms are very much linked and tuned into the lunar phases and the astrological signs. I really believe they are interwoven. Historically, it was considered that the phase in which most women menstruated was in the new moon phase, because we're actually beginning a new cycle after having released. But in fact, there's actually been quite a few scientific studies over the years that have found majority of women will menstruate either on a new moon or a full moon phase. Not so often, although probably more so now, and I'll get into that, the other moon phases. These seem to be the real phases that women menstruate in. We're now less likely to be able to naturally sync up with the moon cycles due to our modern world and the fact that we have so much artificial light. Our bodies are not naturally in sync with the lunation cycle as much as what our ancestors would have been. So being exposed to artificial light and certainly being on contraception will absolutely affect our own natural lunar cycles and our own natural ability to sync up to those lunar cycles. However, anyone who's lived in close proximity with other women in the same house for any period of time will tell you undoubtedly they always end up syncing up. So I believe that we're possibly more in tune than we think we are. We just have to become more and more conscious of it. A book I read years ago, one of my favourite books actually, and it's a book called The Red Tent. And it's the story of the wives of Abraham, which preceding biblical times. And yeah, there were numerous wives, and we won't get into the details of that, but they all lived together. And the book's called The Red Tent because all the wives menstruated at the same time and always on the new moon. And during this phase, they would gather together in the red tent where they were able to be together away from the men for those 4 or 5 days. They'd share stories, they'd collectively menstruate. It's a brilliant book. It's still available. And I did some research about it. And in fact, there is some historical validity to women actually doing this in the past. So even that in its own right, I just love the thought of that, of women gathering each month. They were literally in a straw tent because, of course, there was nothing else to be able to manage your periods with. They were literally sitting on the straw and bleeding. But the fact that they were all sharing stories, that's also a really nice thing to do during, if you've got a girlfriend that you live with and you both got your period at the same time. Use it together. Like, I think we should be talking about it a lot more. Once we start working with the moon energetically, it becomes quite natural to see how your own menstrual cycle syncs up. So you can just ask and discover, are you someone who menstruates on the new or the full moon? In my life, it was definitely both. If you menstruate around the full moon, however, you can begin to keep track of your menstrual cycle just by keeping track of the lunar cycle. You can start to know, as you see that moon start to get fuller, right, I'm feeling a bit emotional because I'm about to get my period and the moon's full, right? So then you also know that you're likely to be ovulating around the new moon cycle. So if you're wanting to get pregnant, for example, and use those natural cycles, you can start tapping into that. I wouldn't recommend using it as a contraception, but some people do. Vice versa, if you menstruate during the new or the dark moon phase, you know that you're likely to be ovulating during the full moon phase. So just little things like that can really help us sync up. Also, you can just start to pay attention to how you feel and take notes of the astrological sign that the moon is in at each phase, and keeping a diary of one of the or using one of the many apps that are available to track your period is a great way. In fact, there's this amazing app called My Moon Time, and you can get it at mymoontime.com, which is a holistic period tracker that also tracks your menstrual cycle and the phases and the movement of the moon, so you can better understand how that's affecting your menstrual cycles and also start to learn about using different moon phases. So it can give us a lot of information about how we might be feeling, what we might be focusing on, how our energy will be playing out, and even just simply knowing the elements that the moon's in, earth, air, fire, and water, can tell us much about our menstrual cycle at that time. So whether or not we're menstruating a full or a new moon or whatever phase the moon's in, just noticing what sign the moon is in when you're having your period can help you kind of make some sense about how your emotions fluctuate during that time. I was very, very affected emotionally during that sort of menstrual phase with PMT, and I'd often know that, okay, I'm going to be a little bit more dramatic this time because the moon's in Leo, or I'm going to be a little bit more weepy because it's in Cancer. So it's really good knowing that. And you might just start noticing yourself doing things that are naturally attributed to one of those elements as you start noticing it more. For example, do you start obsessively cleaning or getting really shitty about the house being messy when it's in an earth sign? Are you more likely to be crying at watching sad movies during a water sign, for example?
Oh, I like the sound of this app. I think I'm actually going to download it myself and check it out. Now, I want to take a minute to discuss my own personal cycle. And how it can fluctuate, I guess, at different points in your life and for different reasons, and depending on what you're going through and what you've gone through. So before I had kids, I had what is known as the Barbie cycle. So it was 28 days long. I bled for 5 days. It was regular every month. Everything was textbook perfect. Barbie cycle. Had my daughter. After she was born, it all went completely back to the way it was pre-pregnancy. When I got pregnant with my son, however, it was a completely different story. So I actually had my period throughout my whole second pregnancy. I didn't actually even know I was pregnant with my son until I was 18 weeks. I carried very small for both of my pregnancies, and it wasn't until I started to feel a little bit bloated, and I looked like a little bit bloated. So I thought, oh, maybe I have a cyst or something. So I went to the doctors. They ran some tests. I got an ultrasound done, and it turns out it wasn't a cyst. There was a baby, which was beautiful because we had actually been trying, but we just didn't know that we had succeeded. Now, I was told by many doctors, including a nurse who decided it was an appropriate time to say this about half an hour after I had had a life-threatening traumatic birth, that it is not possible to have your period during your pregnancy. Well, I am an example that is not true. No, it doesn't follow what we are used to, but I can definitely tell you that it's possible because I am proof. What I've now discovered is that it has actually happened to family members on both sides of my family, both when they were carrying boys only. So I haven't discovered yet if this is a hereditary thing or how it happens or if it has something to do with the gender. But it's definitely bizarre and it's definitely unique and it's definitely something that happened to me. Almost 5 years on from having my son, my cycle still hasn't actually regulated. It never went back to what it was before. It's still very all over the place. I still get my period every month, but sometimes it's a few weeks longer, sometimes it's a few weeks shorter, sometimes I bleed for more days, sometimes I bleed for less days. There's no regularity to it. So syncing up with the moon as best I can and focusing quite heavily on my menstrual cycle and the moon phases is something that's really important to me and quite a priority to me at the moment in my healing journey. Do you have any advice on how to regulate your cycle to sync it up with the lunar cycle?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The only way I really know to sync up with the lunar cycle is to not be on any contraception. And of course, that's not going to be practical for everybody. Um, Also, living in a household with other women can really have you syncing up at the same time. But I guess really it's just observing. It's just starting to observe. So even if you are on contraception, you will still notice, it's not as though you're not having your period, you'll still notice those energetic principles of those the lunation cycles and the full and the new moon phases and your period. And you'll be able to start to see how they interweave together.
Well, thank you so much, Dijana, for sharing your in depth understanding of how, with the supportive power of the moon's cycles, you can become familiar with your own cycles and allow true abundance to enter your life.
You're so welcome. Was there anything else you wanted to cover?
That was it. Thank you so much, Dijana. So, guys, look inward during the new moon and express yourself during the full moon. Anxiety is Not Me is a place for all of us to share and to feel inclusive. If you would like to share your story, please reach out to me, sending you energy of love and peace as you become more aware of your inner light with every breath.